No, I need the.
You're going to go part-time?
Okay.
I am standing in right now for Bethany Groff DeRoe. She is at a loss for words tonight.
No way.
It's very uncharacteristic but true. It's called laryngitis. And so here I am. It's wonderful. It's truly wonderful to see such a large crowd to show up on such short notice. That, we have a community here that is very supportive of the museum's programs and interested in history, and we thank you enormously for that. Since last February, we have been delivering many programs commemorating the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution. And these programs have been supported by grants from the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism and its Mass 250 campaign. We're grateful to be one of the communities that has been chosen for the second year in a row for those grants to tell our revolutionary story. And last year we had just shy of 10,000 people attending those various programs and events, including the parade. And we're on track to match that attendance this year. You are helping out with that. Thank you so much. Mark your calendars for our spectacular Old Newbury Garden Tour. That will be on June 13th and 14th. So to tonight's program. First of all, thank you to the Friends of Old Newbury. Andrea is here in the back. I want to thank particularly Jack Santos. They partnered with us in promoting this event tonight on very short notice. Thank you very much. I want to thank also Shelley Swafford, who keeps us fed. James Doreau and Teddy Speck, who keep us watered. And Annie Bryant, who is filming this event tonight. And as always, our board and our volunteers. So we are delighted to host this evening the screening of In Search of Phillis Wheatley Peters, an historical documentary that debuted in Scotland at the University of St. Andrews on February 23rd. It was then screened on February 26th at Boston's Museum of African American History. Bethany attended that screening and invited the film's director and producer to bring it to us here tonight. It is being screened in 14 places this spring, 12 of them around the United States and 2 in the United Kingdom. And we here at the Museum of Old Newbury are privileged and thrilled to be one of those places. First of all, before we view the film, I want to thank and introduce you to Leslie Askew, the film's director, and Turlo White, its producer. They are right here. If you just stand quickly. Leslie is the director of Askew Pictures, founded in 2010, and Turlo is the film company's head of production and executive producer. They are based in the Netherlands. Originally from Houston and raised across the East Coast of the United States, Leslie studied anthropology at Lawrence University before beginning her career in New York. Before launching Askew Pictures, Leslie worked with major networks including SBS, National Geographic, Al Jazeera, CBS, BET, PBS, History Channel, and CNN, where she produced the award-winning CNN Heroes. Askew Pictures' work spans social impact and lifestyle storytelling. Key projects include Caring for Country with the Yogal Manji Women Rangers in Australia, the festival-screened short Analog Man, the 6-part travel series Trail Towns for SBS, and Pignorant, am I pronouncing that correctly? Mm-hmm. An investigative documentary on the United Kingdom's pork industry, now streaming on Amazon Prime. Today, the company partners across film, television, and digital platforms to craft compelling stories that inform and inspire. Leslie will join me after the film's screening up here for a question and answer session. There is a backstory to how Leslie and Turlough came to be here tonight. You'll see that they consulted half a dozen scholars in their search for Phillis Wheatley Peters. One of them is Newburyport's own Cabria Baumgartner. And they filmed Cabria right here in the museum in Margaret's room. So we have another partner to thank for bringing Leslie and Turlough to the museum. They were looking for a place to interview Cabria last September, and the North of Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau sent them here. Cabria is sorry not to be here tonight. She hosted a screening at Northeastern on Monday night, but she teaches class every Wednesday night. Without any further ado, then, please silence your smartphones, and we will roll them. Well, first of all, thank you, Leslie and Turlough, for sharing your work with us tonight. Another round of applause, please.
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Okay. Before we proceed, I have an apology, a correction, self-correction, and a mea culpa to make. I had misspoken and said I was thanking the Friends of Old Newbury for helping us to promote this. It's the Friends of William Lloyd Garrison, of which I'm a member. So, Richard, Andrea, please forgive me. The Friends of William Lloyd Garrison, folks, helped to promote this. Spectacular film.
Thank you.
And I think its title is just perfect, right? In Search of Phillis Wheatley Peters. Many of us, I suspect, have known who Phillis Wheatley was, but sketchily. And your film's narrative structure is investigative. It probes the historical record for more and more information about her and brings her to life for us. And that's not just cinematically pleasing. I think that realizing Phillis Wheatley Peters, as you've done here, more fully and more truly, really sharpens our understanding of the American past and present. How did this subject come to you? And when and why did you determine to make a film of it?
Firstly, thank you all so much for coming again in such short notice. This is incredible, and it really goes to show how important Phillis is, especially in this region. So I'm humbled that you all got to share in this experience. So in 2022, we were at a conference in France, a documentary film conference, and I overheard two French producers talking about Phillis Wheatley. And I was like, what is happening? And I just tapped him on the shoulders because I had been one or two wines into the cocktail party and was like, what are you talking about? Like, why are you talking about Phillis Wheatley? And they were like, she's amazing. She's done this and she did that. And I was like, yeah, I know, obviously she's amazing. But I knew nothing about her and felt embarrassed, to be honest, that I was standing there being sort of taught about this person that I should know about. And I went home and I researched her. Because I only, in school, in my schools, we only got like a little blurb about her with the frontispiece, and then it's like one or two biographical points, and then that's it. She's really, really taught even her poetry. But as I learned about her and her work, and not only her work, but her legacy, so how she was deemed after her death and then reclaimed and all of these things, for me, she really sort of embodied African-American women, the history of African-American women, from this idea of being exceptional to, despaired, like this, and despaired and discarded. And when I learned also about the African Americans or African people and Native people in early American history, that's really when I was like, I have to tell this story. And her story is so, as a filmmaker, you're always looking for someone, a character who is a sort of an intersection of multiple ideas and multiple story points. And she, as I tried to illustrate in my film, really was at the sort of center of the American Revolution, and learning that African and Native people were viable participants in this history. I really felt robbed as an American, to be honest, and was like, no, it's important to do this more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said indeed. So I want to learn more about your own personal journey of discovery. But first, Dr. Gabin, is that how you pronounce it? She says that the view of Phillis Wheatley that has really been predominant in history, our traditional view, if you will, was shaped by an 1834 biography by Margaretta Odell, who was I looked her up a little bit. She was a relative of Susanna Wheatley, mm-hmm. who was Phillis's enslaver. Can you tell us any more about that?
So Margaretta Odell in the 18th century wrote a book, a short. It's not even a biography. It is just just few paragraphs, and then she republished Phillis's poems. And in that, she described basically how benevolent the Wheatleys were to Phillis, and that she was this genius, and then that John was this ne'er-do-well guy who took advantage of her, and all of these types of things. And what was so insidious about her characterization is that it played into these kind of racial tropes, but that it stuck really in the memory of people, even despite the exhaustive academic research that had been done between that, in the past 50 years even. It's still stuck in people's mentality when they're retelling me the story of Phillis or what they know. It always kind of goes back to Odell. And I didn't realize until maybe 3 screenings in that I was like, oh, this is a direct, it's a direct result of Odell. Like, I didn't realize when I was making this film that I was making it as a reaction to her. Mm. And because I thought, I really want to go apart this story and I'm going to tell this story. But the reason I realized it's a reaction is because Odell's memoir is really it's not based on any facts, as I've said. It's based on her assumptions or these kind of family stories she might have heard that were like 75 years before, between the time she wrote it and the time it actually happened in history, so these kind of things this lore that's passed down. So for my film, I really struck to the historical record. So everything in the film is backed up by a historical record. I was like, this is not going to be based on what I want Phillis to be or who I think she should, or I wonder, there will be none of this kind of idea. Like, it will only be factual. And so even with my historians, if they were to surmise, for instance, about how John and Phillis met, that's going to be backed up in facts. Like, Africans met in, literacy groups or in religion, in church and things like that. That's factually accurate. So, and then outside of that, if it didn't exist, then I didn't include it, because there are beliefs, for instance, that Phillis was, because she was taken from the Senegambia region, she would have been potentially Muslim, spoke Arabic. There is this whole other thought about that. Like, I didn't include any of that because there's no historical record for it. Me personally, I would have loved to describe, to gone into that story. But yes, so as I said, it was really, I was like, no, if I knew I wanted this film primarily for academic purpose, for academic settings, to redress my experience, my educational experience with Phillis. And so since it was going into classrooms and not for Netflix, I was like, we are going to just stick to the record. And then, when I make the feature film, I can make it more sexier if I want to, but for now, and also I don't have the time. In 35 minutes, you don't get to portray academically in order to be balanced. Oh, well, this person thinks this and this other person, and then you can balance out those academic arguments. In 35 minutes, you really just have to stick to the road. So.
As you say, she was an exceptional prodigy. But as your film reveals, and as these scholars point out, she was nonetheless an archetypal black woman at the crossroads of the American Revolution in 18th century British colonial America. It's a complicated history.
Yeah.
Dr. Dayton, who is the one, interestingly, her interest is legal history.
Yes.
And she literally stumbled serendipitously on this significant finding just 4 or 5 years ago. So first of all, can you tell us what Dr. Dayton discovered and how it was that she came upon it?
So yes, so as you said, she's a legal scholar, and she was doing research specifically on court cases where people who were thought to be mentally unwell were being brought to court. So if somebody was deemed unfit and their will and their estates were being called into question by their families. So that's how she came across these court papers, because John Wilkins, one of his, I might get this detail wrong, but I believe it was like his nephew was saying that he was unfit at the time of making his will. So that's how she and John Peters was listed as one of his benefactors. And so that's how she came across the name. She recognized it because she's a history professor at University of Connecticut. She teaches Phillis Wheatley. She knows John Peters was the husband. And then sort of from there, it all kind of unravels, and she found over 100 documents, as she said, connected to these court cases. And then even more, so that's how she came to it.
It's amazing. It's also astounding, right? This information has been unknown, I did the calculation, for 237 years since Phyllis's death. And that we still don't even know where she's buried.
I know.
Right?
I know.
So what does that say about this history?
It's complicated. It says it's complicated, but it's also, for me, I found that really exciting, that that history is living. It isn't this sort of static thing that we know all there is to know, and she's writing a biography about John Peters, so there was even more. That yesterday I was with her and I was poking her for more information, because I was like, I want to make a feature film about this, a feature-length documentary about it. So I was like, I can't finish until, and she's found out more, which she wouldn't tell me, but so I can't share. But yeah, no, I think it's exciting. It can be daunting but exciting.
It also says something about the erasure. Here we are in Women's History Month. We just went through Black History Month, but the erasure of women, black women, in history. 237 years. It was in the public record, as you said, but it has been overlooked.
Yes, absolutely. It's been overlooked, and even just going to her grave, you'd think she was a well-known figure, someone would have looked. I mean, they have looked, but they just can't. They would have noted where, even at her time of death, where she was buried. So yes, it is very telling about the kind of importance or lack of importance of where we put our energy. So yeah.
Dr. Dayton and the other scholars, they acknowledge that they are drawing some inferences from the pieces of information, the pieces of the puzzle. But with this new discovery, they're telling a very different story about about their marriage, John Peters and Phillis Wheatley's marriage. What is that? The differences that stand out to you?
I think because her research, as she outlines, really shows the interior life of their marriage, which we previously had no idea about. and it's not in the best circumstances that, but at least these details from Dinah Cubber give us a sense of what was going on in that household. And then therefore, and also his relationship with Phillis in terms of the dynamic of his need and want to protect her on many, many levels. Like, that is what's evidently clear in the testimony. Like, that also is very complicated because, for instance, Dinah Cubber, she is illiterate, so she has an X. So she's telling her testimony, to someone. So we don't, do we know, we can question, is this exactly what she was saying? She was also, she was in John and Dinah were owned by the same family, right? They had a pre-existing relationship. She also was going to receive money from the estate if she stayed with her enslaver, right? So it's complicated, but still you can see if you read that there's these consistencies. John is protecting Phillis, trying to protect his child, trying to make sense of this legal situation, so he can have land, so he can take care of his family. He is you do get a sense of him in that, which I really liked and tried to demonstrate, that they were a unit and that they were a family, at the very least, like at least what the record is showing. So without trying to over-assert or overclaim anything,
Is it known what became of him after this?
Yes. So after he was released from debtor's prison, he continued working in a store. So he had multiple occupations, as was said in the film. He was a lawyer, so he would defend other people. And then he was a shopkeeper primarily, or he would go on the road and sell things to people, goods during the pre-war, post-war. And then after he gets out of prison, he becomes a doctor, in quotes, because after African people could not be doctors at this time, but he fancied himself a doctor. He had like a little advertisement in the paper where he would put forth his services. And he primarily took care of men and their venereal diseases, and made a living doing that for years and years and years, and eventually bought his own home in Boston. It was a very small home, but still was able to become a landowner outright in his own, in the end. So his story, and Cornelia always makes me remember this important detail of his, is that in his will he had mostly books, and he had this beautiful trunk and these books, and so she surmises that this was what connected him and Phillis, was this like love of reading, and were these her books? We don't know, but that was what was left in his possessions. Yeah.
I have one more question, and then we'll open up to the audience. So this is the 250th anniversary year of the American Declaration of Independence, and the assertion of our self-evident truths of natural rights. You and the scholars who are featured in your film, they present a case that we really ought to elevate Phillis Wheatley Peters to our pantheon of American heroes. And now that you've made your case and shared it with us, what would you like to say in closing that case?
Yeah, it is a slight, I think, to me, it is evident that her, even outstanding the anniversary, that Phyllis's impact on our history is without question. She was the first African person to publish a book of poetry. She did so at a time where she was directly living up to truly the ideals in which we say this nation was founded, in terms of like, she was on the side of this sort of liberty, of fighting for this colony, calling into question, but also challenging it as well, which I think is important to distinguish, and which I love about her, is that she, as much as she was saying, she could have stayed in London, she came back because she believed in this country. And that is something that I struggle to relate to be honest, 100%, of like, it only demonstrated enslavement and capture to you. Why would you make that choice? But I have to know now that she believed in it. She believed in this future, and she believed in this colony. And she was right to do so, because shortly after even demanding her own manumission, slavery was abolished in Massachusetts. So she would have been aware that that was possible and that there was hope in this place. But that hope did not diminish her from being critical of it and hopeful for it. And at a time that was significant to our founding, and I think for any reason but that is why she deserves to be as lauded and celebrated, because that is, for me, those are true American ideals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm glad we have that recorded.
Do we know where John Peters is buried?
No, unfortunately, no.
Because normally associated with a church or something, they kept records of where they were born, where they were buried.
Yeah.
But nothing like that.
Nothing like that, unfortunately. It's so sad.
Thank you.
Do we know if she was formally educated?
Yes.
She was, and also, did she get money for her publication?
Yes. Yes and yes. So we do know that she was formally educated by the Wheatleys in their home. And she did receive she published, I think there were 300 books, and she sold them, but we do not know how much she made. I put this to the biographer, Vincent Coretta, and he's like, I don't know, I never did the math. And I was like, oh, did you not? Okay. Because I was like, Vincent, she needed that money. I put that letter in there so many times because she would have needed and relied on that funding for her life as a free person. So she did have money. We just don't know how much.
Is there anyone following any traces whatsoever of where she might be buried, number one? Number two, there's currently a wonderful exhibit at PEM, at the Peabody Essex Museum, of Edmonia Lewis, who is an African-American, Native American woman who lived in the 19th century and was a sculpturist. And like Phillis, her gravesite was completely lost, and someone stumbled upon it in London.
Oh, wow.
Serendipitously. So if there are any traces whatsoever about Phyllis's gravesite, it would be wonderful to know about that.
I don't know if there's someone looking into it, but on this tour I have told all the actors, you need to get onto it, and find that manuscript as well, please. That needs to happen.
Yeah.
No,
Would you pass that?
I was wondering, as a published author in England, and as the kind of celebrated patronage she had, is she viewed differently in England? Is she recognized in England, and in what way different from the United States?
Yes. So she was the first African woman to publish in England. So she is respected and heralded as such, and highly revered. There is not a monument to her, but there's plaques, and we, interestingly, as they said, we showed the film first in Scotland, in the tour in London. There's a lot of interest across universities and cultural institutions to share this film and to share this story. She is taught, and so, yeah, it's great that there is that respect and connection still.
One question is, did she keep any journals?
I don't know, but you know what? I was thinking that same thing yesterday, and I was like, I wonder where they are, because of course she did.
Yeah, I would have thought too.
Of course she did.
And then another question was, do we know if, and that's why I was thinking of journals, whether she made any effort to try to find out where her African origins were, or what her family was doing?
No, there isn't any record, but she was proposed marriage by a minister who was going to take her back to Africa.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this is prior to John, and she said no, I do not want to go. They would not recognize me. And so that's the only connection we have.
Wow.
And then the last question, I'm sorry, is about her as an artist. Did she reach out to other poets, and did she have any kind of, I don't know, what I have never read any of her poetry, but do we know what sort of a poet she was or how she thought of her poetry?
We don't know her own reflections, but she very much wrote in this sense. Oh, what is the style? I'm not a poetry expert. People wrote about her, right? So there is Jupiter Hammond was a poet, African poet at the time, and he wrote about her, like giving her advice. And other writers wrote about her, but we don't have her writing about other writers. But I know for in fact that she read the newspaper and would have read other people and other African writers at the time. She did have a relationship, as you saw, with Samson Occam, who was an incredible writer as well. So yes, so she would have had that kind of writing community to draw on.
Hi, yes, thank you. The movie mentioned that she had corresponded with both Franklin and Washington,
Yes.
which I thought was incredible. But I'm just wondering if there's any kind of evidence that she made an impression on them, or that maybe changed, like Washington was an enslaver himself, and perhaps Franklin as well, I don't know. But that she made any kind of impression on them, or that they reacted in some way to her, or whether they even read her work. I just wondered if you knew anything about that.
Sure. 3 things I want to say. I don't mention that Thomas Jefferson, going back to the last person's question, he wrote about her. Not in a very negative way, saying that there was no way that she wrote these poems because she was an African person and African people aren't people and blah, 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 that whole narrative. And so he was also a notable person of the time. But her second volume of poetry is dedicated to Benjamin Franklin because she did connect with him in England, and I assume kept up a correspondence in order for her to make such a gesture to dedicate her second volume of poetry to him. George Washington, outside of his response to her poem, of him thanking her for it, he did invite her to come to, what's the name of the? Longfellow, yes, he invited her to come. So there was. And then he did actually eventually include, I believe, Africans into the Continental Army. Do we know that that is directly because she recommended? No. But as Nicole says, he was in need from a sort of PR perspective to look more like he was more of an inclusive person. So I think there was some kind of benefit. Did she have any impact on him as an enslaved person? Absolutely not, because if you look at his history, like he was determined. I don't know. He was an ardent slave owner. Let's say that. So.
I was wondering if there was anything in the writings of the Countess, who was her benefactor, that gave you information about her, or would give you information.
Not that I know. What I found interesting about her is that, she was the benefactor of Samson Occam and George Whitefield, who was one of the founders of the Methodist, the Great Awakening. And so, as is said in the film, and as you probably already know, there was this massive interest to teach enslaved people how to read and write. But George Whitefield owned slaves, and she inherited his plantation after his death. So I find that contradiction quite interesting. Well, for me, I find it as a contradiction. She probably did not at the time. But no, she didn't continue a relationship with Phillis. I would have assumed that they would have, and that it would have, since it worked, but it did not. So, yeah.
Leslie, I don't know if you know this, but Whitefield died here in Newburyport.
No, I did not know that.
And he is buried in Old South Presbyterian Church.
Wow.
Yeah, a couple blocks away from us here.
Yeah, see, I can make a whole film about him. He's like another super fascinating person where I'm saying, like, as a character, he like intersects and talks about, because the impact of that church on the African American community to this day, Jiminy Christmas, it is strong. Like, I could definitely make a short film about him, for sure. Yes.
Is there any evidence at all that the disappearance of her second volume of work was malicious?
No, but I believe it was. I'm to all the scholars like, they stole it, didn't they? And they're like, no, they just didn't return it. And I was like, well, if you don't return something, it's stolen. So, by definition, so no. So she struggled to get, I was just speaking to Cornelia about this yesterday, she struggled to get, you had to get like a literal petition, you go around and you get signatures to say you will buy my, you will buy my book if it comes out. And I didn't realize until she told me yesterday that she would have had to do this by hand. So you literally would have had to gone up to people. How in the hell did she do this? Like she wasn't able to get enough, but that's how she was able to do so. So, but the fact that, to your point, I think she was well known, but she changed her name. After her marriage from Phillis Wheatley to Phillis Peters. So she was writing under a new pen name, which wasn't as potentially well known. But still, whoever it was given to never returned it. And the fact that John, I was thinking even just watching it this last time, where he didn't know who she sent it to, because why is he putting this sort of like blanket kind of like, call to the wind? Like, dude, you know who your wife sent it to. Like, you would have put your money together to send it somewhere. Like, but he didn't know or remember or whatever. I don't know, it's very tragic. But I'm sure it's in someone's attic. That's usually the academic response, to be honest, is like, it's just stuck in someone's attic and one day they'll pick it up and they'll realize. But they might not realize because it's called Phillis Peters, and it's, it's that, so. But I'm hopeful. Let's be hopeful.
Anyone else have a question? Yeah.
Is there anybody working currently on putting her works together as a book or as a way of being able to read her works?
Well, you can read her work. Her books are still being published, so you can read it, but no, and then she has 2 biographies, which I highly recommend, one by Vincent Coretta and one by David Wallstreicher, that you can read. Both, they are independent. I mean, they work well together. Vincent takes a more historical record, very detailed account. Wallstreicher puts her in context, which I tried to do this as well, of the time. So it's a lot about early American history, other Africans at the time, comparing her to other Africans who were literate and all of this type. So it puts her into a much more 360 view, which I highly recommend. And then in that are deep discussions of her work.
And both of those biographies were published before Cornelia Dayton discovered.
Yes.
Right.
Just wondering, for those people that are believers in reincarnation, are you thinking about doing a film about Phillis Wheatley and Amanda Gorman being the same person?
I would love that, yes. I didn't think of it in terms of reincarnation, but obviously she is, yes. I want her to do the voice for the film. That would be amazing, but yes, for sure.
You were telling me beforehand that Manisha Sinha wrote a piece about that very thing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's how when I started, was the first article I read, that she said that she is the descendants of Phillis Wheatley, this poem that she wrote. So, yeah, you're spot on.
I just want to know, what is the location of the statue?
Oh, it's in Boston. It's on Commonwealth. Where is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Between Exeter and Gloucester.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
In that park in Commonwealth Avenue.
Exactly where it is.
Any other questions? All right then. Well, again, a big round of applause. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
very, very much, making the effort to come up here to Newburyport.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
me.